Hello and welcome back. This is part 6, and I made some changes to the channel and numbered the relevant videos, part 1, part 2, part 3, and so on. This is part 6 again. And the reason for this is so that you can follow the logical development of these arguments better than if you were just skipping around. So, that being said, for the 1,000 years period from the fall of the Roman Empire to the period of Enlightenment, there was one answer to the questions people asked. Like, why do we get sick? Why are there plagues and pestilences? Why did we have a mini ice age in the early 1400s? Why do we have severe storms and floods? And the answer? It's God's will. And while that might seem like a very pious and wonderful demonstration of faith, it was anything but. Because while you're on your knees congratulating yourself for being so holy, the fact is that this discouraged people from actually trying to find the truth, to discover the true reasons that people got sick and that sometimes crops didn't come up so good and things like that. The progress that we make is a source of pride to mankind, and the best thing to do is, or the best way to look at it, is to consider where we are now and where we came from. And I can tell you that the last place you ever wanted to be was in a medieval town or city, because they were cesspits. The streets were ankle deep in garbage, human excrement, dead animals, and just about every nauseous thing that you can think of. And these places smelled, pretty bad. People had no idea about sanitation. And when it comes to progress, let me point out another fact that you may not be aware of, that all the casualties in the American Civil War, most of them, if they survived the battles, died under the physician's care. Because even this way, surgeons never washed their hands. They were carriers of disease and infection. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is because of the Big Bang Theory. As I've already stated my view on that, and that it is nonsense. It's ideology and not science. And if you plug into the address bar in YouTube and look up Edwin Hubble, And you find out that he joined the staff at the Mount Wilson Observatory in 1919, right when they had just finished the 100-inch telescope. This is the biggest telescope in the world at that time. It may also surprise you to know that even at this late date, scientists didn't know, the astronomers didn't know that there were other galaxies out there. They knew that there were clusters of some kind, but they didn't know what they were. And so Mr. Hubble, armed with the 100-inch telescope, started peeking out into the cosmos. And he discovered that, wow, there are other galaxies, and he discovered a few hundred. Of course, today there are billions and billions of them, each one having billions and billions of stars. That's how rapid the progress has been since 1929, and that is the year when you'll read in one of the articles, if you search for Edwin Hubble, one of the articles says that it was in 1929 that Hubble discovered that the universe was expanding. And that is not true. Well, you see, science has become the new religion, and they have a certain dogma that they want you to believe, whether it makes any sense or not, just like the old-time religion, you know. And there's a resistance to any arguments that might challenge this view. And the fact is that what Hubble saw was the Doppler effect related to these galaxies that he had just discovered. And he noticed that some of them demonstrated a redshift and others blue shift. But he didn't ascribe any cause for this. He didn't say that the universe is expanding. That's what the dogmatists want you to believe. And that's how they distort history. Now it's revisionist history. It's not what it used to be. Because the Big Bang Theory actually wasn't proposed until 2 years later, 1931. And it was proposed by a Belgian astronomer who, I believe, might have had an agenda. I'll introduce you to him and see if maybe you don't think he had an agenda too. Here he is. So there it is. Father George. Maybe we're still trying to preserve the phenomena. Because he came out with this Big Bang Theory in 1931, 2 years after the article that said that Edwin Hubble discovered that the universe was expanding. He did no such thing. What he did detect was the presence of galaxies, other galaxies besides our own. Because even up to that late date, astronomers did not know that there were other galaxies out there. There were clusters of some kind, but they didn't know what they were. And it was in 1919 when Mr. Hubble joined the staff at the Mount Wilson Observatory shortly after they had completed the 100-inch telescope. The most powerful seeing eye in the sky at that time. And he started looking through the telescope and discovered other galaxies. Wow. And he also discovered something else, and this is called the Doppler effect. And these outlying galaxies demonstrated both redshift and blueshift. Now the article, if you type Edwin Hubble into the YouTube search, you will find the article that says, in 1929, Edwin Hubble discovered that the universe is expanding. Well, this is not true. This is part of the apologist propaganda that the new science, the new religion called science, calls, well, we call it dogma. And there are apologists who get in line because, well, they want to belong to the club and get that grant money. You know, I mean, who wants to be called a heretic? Well, the fact is that Father George came up with the Big Bang Theory in 1931, which was exactly 38 years after the Catholic Church finally conceded that the Earth revolved around the sun. So this marks them as typically being behind the times, not only in wardrobe and in knowledge and understanding, but in general. They live in the past and they encourage you to live in the past and to hang on to these old ideas that just don't work anymore. So the effect of this Big Bang Theory, which has no basis in fact at all, held that farther away a galaxy was, the more pronounced was the red shift. So Father George said, oh, well, that means that the galaxies are racing away from us. Yep. So if the universe is expanding, then it must have been smaller at one time. And if we keep regressing back farther and farther and conceptualizing a smaller and smaller universe, well, we finally end up with a little point in space. Now, I hate to throw in a little technical jargon, but this point was teensy weensy. I mean, really, really small. And then it just exploded into billions and billions of galaxies, each one having billions and billions of stars. Well, what we have is an event. And back to this cause and effect thing, what caused the event in the first place? And then some other acolytes who follow the dogma even suggested that as the Big Bang expanded, it created space. Well, what was there before? Some kind of cosmic jello that they had to get it out of the way? No, the human mind believes in beginnings and ends. The Great Spirit has no beginning, has no end. It just keeps going on and on and on. Cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. And I have a synonym for eternity. It's now. It's always now. But getting back, I used to have a boat on Long Island Sound, and I would head out of the harbor into the sound, and there'd be waves coming in, and I'd head over to Long Island sometime. Now, as I'm moving toward Long Island, the waves are coming in at uniform intervals. But because I'm going out there against the waves, my boat is impacting them at a higher frequency. The faster I go, the harder those waves are hitting my boat. Higher frequency. Now, in sound propagation, of course, everything goes out in waves because now quantum physics tells us that energy is all there is and everything emits wavelengths. So if you have maybe a fire engine with a siren and it's coming down the street in your direction, why, it's pitched way up high. But when it passes and it's going away, you notice that the pitch drops. And that's what happens when I would be coming back into the harbor from the sound, and then I'd be going with the waves. And they would strike at a much lower frequency. And I'd have to kind of stay in the trough to keep from this happening all the time, which is kind of unsettling. But that's kind of a homely view of the Doppler effect. Now, there's a couple of things I remember as a youngster, seeing some things in science books. One of them was Brontosaurus, one of these 70-ton huge dinosaurs. They were at a time the biggest creatures that ever walked the earth. And that was only until they discovered Argentinosaurus, which was even bigger. See, Brontosaurus was 70 tons. This baby was 100 metric tons. And of course he had a brain the size of a golf ball, which was located by one of his kidneys. But his head was 5 stories, as high as a 5-story building. Well, even with the brontosaurus, I saw a picture in a book where it shows a brontosaurus in a lake up to about mid-height, and the explanation was that these big critters had to hang out in lakes to help buoy themselves up against this tremendous weight. Nature doesn't work that way. When they roamed the earth was spinning faster on its axis. One of the reasons dinosaurs actually became extinct is that they got too heavy as the rotation of the earth slowed, and it's still slowing. 1 second per century. And we were a lot closer to the sun at that time, almost to the point where Venus is right now. And some scientists are now starting to study Mars and have come to the conclusion that life actually began on Mars. And you know, it did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back to the Big Bang theory and the way we alien critters down here are so preoccupied with beginnings and ends. Why, the universe had to have a beginning. And of course, one of the alternatives of, well, how it's all going to end is we're going to have a finite event with a limited amount of energy, even though it might be a tremendous amount. And it's a finite event that's going to produce an infinite effect. Maybe the dumbing down of America started earlier and is more serious than anyone ever guessed. Let's take the abortion issue, which is a political football that the psychopaths in D.C. throw out every once in a while to keep your brain busy and occupied with the distractions that just to keep you from trying to find out what they're really up to. Such a great job they're doing too. But there's the abortion issue, which is purely subjective. It has nothing to do with government. And the 14th Amendment says as much. Because it begins by defining a citizen of the United States. And that's anyone born or naturalized in the United States of America, and such a person now, according to this unconstitutional amendment, 14, says that anyone born or naturalized in the United States of America is a citizen of the United States and of the state in which he resides. So what are we doing monkeying with the unborn? I don't know of any way that a fetus can be naturalized. And of course, I'm not in favor of abortion either. I think there are more sensible ways to deal with the issue, like contraception maybe. Prevent the problem from ever starting, and then you don't have to ask such stupid questions like, when does life begin? When does it stop? Oh gosh. Well, all right. It's hard to stay on track here because there's so much going through my mind here, and one of the things that went through my mind one time. Not that this is getting more to the point. I'm a cyclist, and a slow month I'll ride 200 miles. When the weather's right, I'll do 300, 350, sometimes even 400 miles in a month. And I ride all over the place. And there's a couple of trails. One is the old Santa Fe Trail. That's the track bed of the old Santa Fe Railroad. And it's been paved over. And there's another one north of here, and that's called Katy Trail, and that was the track bed for the old Katy Railroad. And that runs about 4.5 miles into downtown. And it crosses, there's a couple of intersections with city streets. In fact, there's 3 of them. And the one closest to the west intersects with a thoroughfare on which you find some very nice restaurants and fashionable gift shops and what have you. And at this intersection there are shady, well, especially on the west side, there's a shady benches. You know, if I'm out there riding around and it's pretty hot, well, then I'll just sit in the cool shade under the trees, drink some water, and smoke. I smoke. Been smoking for 62 years. It's not the cigarettes that are harmful, but ooh, watch out for those filters. Anyway, I was sitting on one of these benches one day, and I saw a pole. Noticed the pole. Of course, I'd seen it before, but now my attention focused on it. And it's a few feet north of the trail. And on that pole is a sign. And it's the sign, the town line. It says the town line between the city and one of the island communities. There's 2 of them, completely surrounded by the city with separate municipalities, and this is one of them. And being the, well, who I am, I got this crazy idea that, you know, if I stood right in front of that pole, I could have one foot in the city and the other foot in the town, and I could be in 2 places at one time. Now, of course, that sounds absurd. And it's like, if you had an aerial photograph, you wouldn't see the lines anyway. So, it's just the way of things. But in fact, I believe that it is possible to be in more than one place at a time. Allow me to explain. See, when Father George was inventing the Big Bang Theory, hearkening back to Ptolemaic astronomy, not only was the Earth the center of the universe, but it was also motionless. Of course, now we know better. Everything in the universe is constantly in motion. Every nanosecond, every microsecond, every picosecond. And just like my boat when I was going out in Long Island Sound, like if I was going out there and Long Island was moving away from me, well, that would kind of affect the frequency of the wave strikes. And all these kind of things popped into my head, you know. And then I thought, well, here, the Big Bang Theory does the same thing that explanation for all the disasters and tragedies in the Dark Ages and the medieval period. It does the same thing because it discourages the search for the truth. Now, I mentioned these science books. Well, aside from the one with the brontosaurus in the lake, there was another one that showed the universe, or the solar system. And what do you think was shown between the planets? Between the sun and the planets, or one planet and the other, and whatever it was trying to show. You know what was there? Nothing. I mean, it was just sterile. Of course, now we know that there are dust clouds and rocks and gases and dark matter. Of course, dark matter is just matter that doesn't have enough mass to ignite like a star does. And even that takes a while. Talk about that when we get to the black holes. Okay. Well, with the red shifts and blue shifts, everything moving around, and the light being propagated over hundreds of thousands, millions, and billions of light years, and having to pass through so many obstacles, junk, gas, dust, rocks. And because, you know, the physicists for the longest time, and I think some of them still haven't been able to figure out if light is a wave or a particle. The fact is, it's both. Well, if you have a technician in the family, or you know somebody who has an oscilloscope, and he can hook that oscilloscope into a device that runs at house current, and show you the way the voltage varies and the current, and these are called sine waves. And the reason they're called alternate current is because it goes to plus, and then it goes to zero, and then it goes to minus, and back to zero, and back to plus. A sine wave. Well, what it's measuring is the flow of electrons. And these electrons are produced by an armature copper windings spinning in a magnetic field. And when the sine wave is at its peak, that's when the conductors are cutting through the maximum number of lines of force. And at 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, they're running with the lines of force, no contact, zero. And then they come around to the other side and going in the other direction, they cut maximum lines of force again. So you have positive, zero, negative, positive, negative, positive. It does this. Well, if you can rotate isometrically the view, what you'll see is that it's a spiral. So light is a spiral when it's moving through the air, and it's a particle when it strikes an object. Simple, simple, simple. Well, the Big Bang Theory, of course, like I say, would inhibit the truth to be discovered because it would discourage any further investigation. And then we might find out that it could make a potentially, maybe a kind of dreamy thing, vision of us going into space a lot easier if we could understand what's really going on. Now, light is not constant. What we have here is as energy is all there is, and that is the universal law of nature. Energy is all there is. And energy only wishes to combine with itself. And that's why if you put two little drops of water close enough together, they join. It's a weak force, I think they call it. Well, okay, so energy transfer and transformation takes place along a spectrum. And this spectrum is called the spectrum of energy transfer and transformation. Now it's infinitely long, and that might be a little hard to picture, but I'll help you with that if I can. See, because at the low end, you have Kelvin's absolute zero. And at the high end, you have Einstein's E equals mc squared, which just says that mass accelerated to the speed of light, at the speed of light, that's why it's squared, because it's instantaneous, travels at c, speed of light, in a vacuum, becomes pure energy. Of course, there's no such thing as a vacuum. Well, your Hoover or Electrolux is vacuum, but it has to be in a contained space. Because if it isn't, then all this other stuff is going to just rush in and fill the void, like your vacuum cleaner does. And I've worked in industry, and I know that there's a machine, it's called a fluoroscope, and it does fluoroscopy. And it means, if you're looking at a machine, for example, that's made of steel and there's gears and stuff on the inside, this machine can peer right into it and show you all the gears and connections. It's X-ray. X-ray can penetrate tempered steel. And it's the upper end of the light spectrum. And there's a lower values of light, like ultraviolet, and then there's visible light, and then there's infrared, and then there's radio waves. And of course we know there are sounds that dogs can hear but we can't. But there's also sounds that are pitched so low we can't hear them. So we're kind of stuck in a segment of energy transfer and transformation where we can perceive these things, but outside of that, no. Well, the speed of light is not constant. It varies inversely with the density of the medium through which it passes. And you don't have to be a scientist to figure that out. All you have to do is go out there and try your hand at spearfishing. Because you might be in 2 feet of water and you look down and you see a fish. That fish isn't where it appears to be, because of something that's called the refraction of light. Because light moves more slowly through a denser medium, like water. So it's moving this way, and your line of sight is coming down this way. And it will show you that fish farther away than it actually is. It's actually closer. So you have to learn to judge it. Well, we also hear now that there are many different detection media for investigating the cosmos. Why, we have X-ray probes, ultraviolet probes. We've found radio stars and infrared stars. And I propose to you the idea that perhaps these different aspects that we perceive are all aspects of a single star. The X-ray light gets to us the quickest, so that's the closest point to where it is right now. And then the UV or the blue or whatever would be a little more historical. And then of course we know that the visual perception would have it, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of light years away. And then if we go to infrared, that might be even more ancient. I mean, the radio universe would probably have it as way, way back. But if we could connect the dots, gosh, we wouldn't have to deal with the curved universe anymore. Because that's another pill that astronomers ask us to swallow, and that is the idea that the universe is curved. No. Any two objects anywhere can be connected by a straight line. But because of Einstein's theory of relativity, it takes a certain amount of time for the light to reach us from these far-flung distances. So if we had our eye on a star, even 10 light years away, something we could probably cover in 1,000 years. Well, as we move closer and closer to it, the time it takes for the light to reach us shrinks. And we would follow an arc as we got closer. Because the star, don't forget, is moving too. And we'd be... Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could connect the various aspects that we observe to a single star, to single stars? So you say, well, there's a star, we'll call it Jack 21. I say, well, radio star over there. I think that was Jack 21, maybe billions and billions of years ago. And then, yeah, there's infrared. That looks like Jack 21, maybe a few 100 billion years ago. And let's see now. There's the visual, and that's Jack 21, all right. And that's let's see, what is it, about 6 or 7 billion years away? Yeah, light years, that is. And the infrared. That was only maybe a few 100 million light years. And then the X-ray, which might have been a few 100 light years, or years, whatever. And I was saying light years, no, years. That's how long ago. And now we have X-ray, which are the most recent. Well, maybe we could plot those points and determine the velocity, and then when we start projecting microwave sensors out there, maybe we'll find microwave stars. And one of these might be Jack 21. Anyway, my friends, this is just another venture into the spirit, the search for truth, with the remission of all ignorance, superstition, and stupidity that masquerades as faith, an ideology that masquerades as science. I hope I've given you something to think about. And don't forget, we're on a journey, and I'd like to see us get there. All right. Again, love you all. And I'm not too up on this YouTube stuff, but I understand it's good if you like me. So if you like it, well, just hit the button. So in the meantime, thank you for stopping by. Have the best day ever. And be happy. Don't worry. It's all make-believe anyway. Bye-bye.